it is indeed a tight program, so we will directly jump into the second section of this seminar, which will deal with organized crime and corruption, and then some historical lessons learned, and finally some future approach. But now the first will deal with, as mentioned, corruption and organized crime, and we will pay our attention to Kosovo. And our first speaker is Mr. Mats Mattsson, and he is a lawyer and has served as chief prosecutor at the Swedish Economic Crimes Authority since 1998, and between 2004 and 2005 he served as international state prosecutor at state court in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and in October last year, in 2012, he was appointed head of the executive division of EU-LEX. Welcome, Mattsson, and you will speak on organized crime and corruption, a heavy burden on the shoulders of the Western Balkans and the EU. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I was thinking of first maybe saying something about what are we doing in EU-LEX, because sometimes I hear that EU-LEX, what are you actually achieving? Are you doing anything? Well, as I see it, the executive side of EU-LEX is trying to solve the major problems, trying to help Kosovo solve the major problems of, most of all, corruption and organized crime. We are doing that in different ways. We are helping the country with the cases, you can say concrete cases. That is one way of doing it. And the concrete cases is if you have organized crime cases, it is not so easy to investigate those if you are a Kosovo national, of the simple reason that many of those perpetrators, they come from abroad or has some connections abroad. So it is very easy for them to run away and to hide in other countries. And if the country doesn't have a functioning legal assistant or legal help from other countries, this makes the whole thing problematic. Criminals are getting free, and that is one of the important things that we from EU-LEX is trying to solve. We are the go-between in those situations. We have been working with another way, abstract way, and that is to try to create what you can call a learning organization. That is, so to say, an idea to transfer the competence and the knowledge of the internationals over to, most of all, young persons and young prospects in Kosovo. I will come back a little to that later. EU-LEX has also been working with the kind of to identify the problems that you have in Kosovo, and that is the legislation. You can have, from the start, it was big problems concerning the legislation. I will say today, the kind of legislation that is in force is good. It's, if you look at it, it's quite good. You are really satisfied with that. It is very modern, and in many ways more modern than the Swedish system, judiciary. Now, of course, the implementation is not always so easy, but it is in many ways a functioning legal system in the majority of the cases, in normal cases. As I mentioned, it is the big problems are concerning war crimes, organized crime, and corruption, and of course financial crimes connected to that. What we are doing we have, so to say, found a good basis for the future cooperation between EULEX and the local institutions. And we are trying to implement the legislation also on the more difficult cases, trying to build up precedents, trying to build up the legal order as we can see it in a modern democracy. We have in the international cooperation, you can say that Kosovo is a small country, as I said, and this small country makes it difficult to cooperate with other countries, and we have, especially when it comes to Serbia and other countries in the region, then EULEX is the one that is very much building up the direct contacts, and we can, for instance, when it comes to war crimes, I think that is one of the most typical and very emotionally loaded crimes. War crimes, you can say, are problematic in many different ways, but I can mention one is that the war crimes suspects, they are in one sense, of course, war heroes. They are the ones risking their lives for their countries, and they took the initiative to fight the oppressor. They fought for their country, so they are war heroes in one sense. Then maybe they made some bad things as well, but now this means that the person has two sides, one good side and one bad side. This is, of course, a problem, an ethical problem. How do you justify going for the war heroes? Kosovo has another problem, and that is that in war crimes, you have different kinds of perpetrators. You have the perpetrators that committed war crimes to the Serbs. They are in Kosovo. And the perpetrators that committed war crimes against the Kosovars, they are in Serbia. How do we solve that problem? It is not easy because you don't really extradite these guys. So you have to transfer the trial from one country to another. You have to transfer the evidence, and you have to help them do it. And this is also something that we in EULEX has been working a lot with. I think we also, from EULEX side, have the trying to the pressure on local. This is the interesting part. The pressure on local prosecutors and judges are very intense, and that is especially in cases when you have corruption or when you have organized crime. And it is a little bit a special problem in Kosovo because there are two combined things that is, so to say, working when it comes to corruption. One is that you are corrupt in the sense that they are offering bribes. And the bribe is, of course, a reward. That is something positive. But at the same time, because of the construction of Kosovo, you can see that it contains of families and related families, big families. You can call it maybe clans, but it is a very big relatives. They keep together. And these, they keep together, and that is very good from a social point of view, because they are supporting each other. So that is a positive thing. But if these clans are becoming criminal, then it is a problem. Or if the clan is dominated by a person in the top that is a criminal person, because then they will also use a kind of internal threat and social pressure on the persons to accept bribes. This means that you don't only have the easy way of going up and say, I want to offer you a bribe. It is not so easy to say no, because you have the pressure that if you say no, you are frozen out. And you can also be physically threatened. This, I think, is one of the problems that makes the legal order a little bit problematic. And some cases, I'm pointing out that some cases are very difficult for local prosecutors and judges to handle. I want to say something about the mission. Well, we have a mission in Kosovo, and the mission of Kosovo is what I have been trying to describe so far, is a couple of the legal points of view. That is what the rule of law mission is trying to do, trying to help up the criminals and trying to put them behind bars. Now, the mission is also a political creation. And the political creation, it means that you have political goals, you have political ideals, and you are striving to solve political problems. Now, the political problems, they are not identical with the legal problems that you have. The political problems, they are like, I want a safe and secure environment. That is very important for the politicians. The politicians also have a very big interest in the legislation, but in a different way. They want to use the legislation as tools to achieve the political goals. That is not what the lawyer is doing. That is not what the judge is doing. That is not what the prosecutor is doing. So this is a kind of a conflict situation that occurs within the mission. I should mention an example. It is showing, so to say, the kind of problems, and it puts it, so to say, right on the spot. It was 2 weeks ago that the Serbian minister, Alexander Vulin, that has the responsibility for Kosovo, the Serbian responsibility for Kosovo. He entered Kosovo, northern Kosovo, and he held some speeches. The problem was that he was not, the Minister of Justice had not said that it is okay for you to enter the country. So in a sense, he was illegally in the country. Now the question was, had he illegally entered the country? If he has, that is, of course, a crime. That is, anyway, a crime in Kosovo. There was a very eager local prosecutor that said that, we have grounded suspicion that he has illegally entered the country. And he went to the court and issued a warrant for Alexander Vulin's arrest. Now, if Vulin are arrested when he is in Kosovo, you can see that there are political problems. How do we really handle this? And of course, it is easy to understand that the politicians became extremely nervous. What is happening to the dialogue? What will the Serbs say? What will the Kosovo government say? And all that. So, of course, there is a pressure on EULEX. Why don't you, in EULEX, take this case over and you fix it? Well, now you are talking a political ideal and you are talking to the lawyers in the executive divisions. And I can mention that what actually happened was that I was asking the chief EULEX prosecutor, and I was sending a question to the president of the EULEX judges and asking, do you have any legal grounds for taking this case over? The answer was very easy. 2 letters, N-O. No. So, unfortunately, I had to tell the Brussels that that is not possible. It is absolutely impossible. They refuse. Yeah, but the argument was, if you look at the statue, you can see that there is a possibility for you to take over. No, it is not intended for these kind of cases where you risk a fine. That is absolutely not the idea. And they were referring, our, so to say, lawyers, are referring to the law of jurisdiction. And it doesn't give us that authority in a case like that. Well, this was just, so to say, an example of the political interest of solving the problem and the way that the executive is trying to solve it. Say something about organized crime. We have organized crime and corruption. They are the two main problems that I would like to focus on. Now, if we look at the organized crime, how are they situated? How are they cooperating? What is within the organized crime? How is that functioning? Well, one thing that is very interesting is that you can see that Serbs and Albanians are cooperating very well, extremely well. They don't have any problems, rather the opposite. They are doing good money, both of them, and they don't have any problems in cooperation. This is, of course, a way. Why do they cooperate so well? Well, one thing is because the states are not cooperating so well. So they automatically have something to gain, and it is extra much to gain, not the normal one, but now they can also have a safe and secure environment for themselves in their criminal activities. Now, how do you fight this kind of crimes? Well, we have problems, of course, with the cooperation, but we have, if you look at EULEX, we have a lot of prosecutors and police from different backgrounds and from different legal systems. And then we have, they are all in Kosovo, with the Kosovo legal system. That is the one that we are applying. This is, I think, our big task, and this is what we are working very intensively with the Minister of Justice, and that is to build up our cooperation with them and to try to find an integrated system where our prosecutors, our judges, and our investigators are investigating in close teams together with the KP and together with the Serbian parts as well as with the Albanian parts of the KP. And I can say there are both Serbian and Albanian parts, and there are in Albania, in Kosovo, quite good investigators as well. The problem is they are too few. That is, so to say, our task, to help them build up and go further.
Thank you very much, Mats Mattsson. You will come back for some questions later on, but you will get an applause as for now. Because we have 3 speakers on this topic, the Kosovo topic, and the next speaker is Inga-Britt Ahlenius. And Inga-Britt Ahlenius is a well-known and recognized Swedish auditor and public servant. And as Auditor General, she has held several international positions. And between 2003 2005, she served as Auditor General of Kosovo. And between 2005 and 2010, she was the Undersecretary General for the United Nations Office of Internal Oversight Services. Welcome, Inga-Britt Ahlenius, and please, the floor is yours for your perspective.
Thank you very much. So, just what you said, I don't have a very recent experience from Kosovo, but I have a very solid experience from Kosovo during my stay in 2003 and 2005 and onwards when I then arrived in New York. And I must say that I was appalled by my experience, all from the start with the UNMIK mission, and throughout my 2 years, and also throughout my mandate in New York, when I tried to audit and scrutinize the activities of the UNMIK. I will not use the word corrupt just to protect myself, but I said that I met a mission that did not see, that did not hear, and did not want to act. UNMIK was supposed to be the success story. And the success as such was measured in a way that had a very quick fix character. The success was measured by the speed by which the UNMIK leadership could transfer authority to the provisional institutions of self-government, the PISK, unless of whether there was a capacity in the PISK to assume such a new authority or not. And certainly, as the Auditor General of Kosovo, responsible for the establishment of the Independent Audit Office, I was a potential threat to this success story by presenting and bringing into light all sorts of problems. So they worked against me all from the start. When I arrived, I had arrived on the promises that there was an agreement between EAR and the European Union at the time, setting up a project group assisting me in my task to establish that Independent Audit Office. And a few weeks after I had signed my contract, there was some sort of change in the leadership of UNMIK. And when I arrived, they said, well, this contract is not any longer valid because there is new leadership now. So there I was without any staff in my project group, and I had to fight for several months, bringing it up finally to Mr. Holkery, to have these few staff that was really necessary to assume responsibility of establishing that audit office. During these 2 years, you will find, or one can find, the reports submitted by the SRG to the Security Council in New York via the Secretary General. And you will find that everything is going smoothly. There is no corruption in Kosovo. We have established an anti-corruption legislation. Everything is going very fine. And if you contrast these SRG optimistic or rosy reports with what was written at the same time by International Crisis Group, you will believe that you were talking about two different universes. There was I think also because of or maybe the success, the measurement of the success of UNMIK also reflects the extremely short-sighted perspective of the international community when they established UNMIK. Certainly, as has been stressed before, focus was on legislation, but leaving more complicated issues behind or aside, like history, tradition, culture. And it was also a narrow focus, which is still the fact in the international community. The perspective is that democracy is achieved and arrived at once you have arranged the general elections and people have had the opportunity to go and vote for themselves. But I would say that this is where everything starts. Because if this democracy can't deliver what people are expecting as a rule of law, uncorrupt judges, uncorrupt police officers, uncorrupt administration, well, democracy is compromised. There was also a lack of focus on the economic conditions in Kosovo. You can see this little region, landlocked region, dependent entirely on the diaspora transfers and international transfers, and no industrial bases whatsoever. Lars Trädgård, who is a Swedish historian, professor in history, once said that one important feature of the Swedish success story from a very poor country into being a modern welfare state based on rule of law is the abandoning of the clan-based society and the establishment of a legitimate central state. This perspective is also stressed in the World Bank report now some 10, 12 years ago, where the World Bank says that there will be no economic progress, no economic development without a high-quality state. And as you know, the Swedish journey from the clan-based society into a modern rule of law-based nation with a legitimate central state has been a very long journey. I mentioned the short-sighted perspective, and I was reminded of that later on when in 2007 I was invited to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who had arranged a seminar, I guess, to prepare themselves in the upcoming declaration by Kosovo of their independence. I was invited together with a general, a Swedish general who had been in command in Kosovo, and also together with a prosecutor who has also been working in Kosovo during some time. We three of us, we were called the Gyttjans hjältar, the heroes of the mud. And we three of us, we were all agreed on the challenges that the international community meets in Kosovo, and also the need for an extremely long-term commitment in the ambition to establish a rule of law-based democracy in Kosovo. I had a picture. I don't know what happened with it, because I brought it with me at the time. And I thought it was interesting because I had taken this text from the Executive Report on Informal Technical Needs Assessment for Future International Engagement in Kosovo, dated in February 2006. This was a document established by the concerned parties. I think there were the big powers, NATO representatives, representative for the European Union, etc. And they agreed on the description of the challenges in Kosovo at the time, which had which called for a light European presence, as they said. And I know that the European community representative was really surprised when he, at the time, saw the description of the challenges meeting the international community in Kosovo in 2006. And you see all the big problems remain in Kosovo at that time. When I received the minutes from that meeting in the Ministry of Finance, I said, I've never been to that meeting, because the minutes reflected the discussion on such an aggregate level that every time of analysis and deviation was hidden. So I really, from New York, I said I have to reserve my position on these minutes, because these are my view on the problems lying ahead when it comes to Kosovo. To solve the problems, you have to recognize that there are some challenges and problems. So you also have, in this case, to recognize that this is not a quick fix. This is not a project of 2 years or 5 years, as was the feeling I had from the Minister of Foreign Affairs representatives. It's a question of one generation's commitment, if you are bringing Kosovo into what we call the rule of law state. I don't have any recent experience now of Pristina or Kosovo, but I'm also informed that there is a thriving business in real estate exploitation in Pristina. And I asked myself, is that a promising feature or a sign of success in the economy? I doubt that is the case. If you look at the balance of payment, you will find something else. So what I said is that one has to have a realistic view on the challenges ahead, and also to recognize that there is a long-term commitment by the international community, by the European Union, if the ambition is to include Kosovo in the European family as a democratic state based on rule of law. And as I just said, democracy is not achieved once people have been able to exercise their right to vote. This is where the challenge and the problem start, because this state has to deliver what the people expect: security, incorrupt judicial system, and etc. Thank you very much.
Inga-Britt Ahlenius, and you will also be back for some questions shortly. Now our third speaker is an associate professor at the University of Pristina, but he is also, from 2008, the Deputy Prime Minister of Kosovo, and since February in 2011, he's also the Minister of Justice. Please welcome Mr. Hajerin Kuci. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone here. I'd like to thank all of you that you shared this time sitting with us together. It is very easy for me to talk for some issues after Peter Fate here, Medson, and the last speaker. This is very good to share some credit with you, but to share some responsibilities too. But the main credit and responsibilities belong to the government of Kosovo for something that we did good or we did not enough. Let me express some of my positions regarding to the current situation for fighting crime or organized crime or for rule of law in Kosovo. Let me express some of my positions, not just as a Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Justice, but also as a citizen of Kosovo, and how we are doing today, and maybe much more I'd like to be focused on the future, how we need to do more. First, we are not immune from the organized crime and corruption and from different crimes that they are mentioned here, but also they are part of our society, not just as a post-war, post-communist society, but as a society in transition. But I'd like to present here that we did a lot together with the international community. We did a lot, and justice, it was under the supervision, or maybe led by UNMIC until 2008, and from 2008 until today, we are sharing responsibilities with ULEX. ULEX is the biggest mission for the rule of law in Europe. I think the biggest mission for rule of law everywhere that Europe sent it. And I'm surprised sometimes when I'm getting reports that the weakest part of the Kosovo society is the rule of law. I think that we need to do something more, both of us, to improve progress report, but also to improve the situation in Kosovo. We did something regarding to the main, or maybe three main reforms. The first is legislative reform. I fully agree with Medson that he mentioned that we are having one of the best laws in the region. Not just because of our capacities, or maybe because of our goodwill, but because of the international presence. Until 2008, all laws, they have been adopted in the Parliament of Kosovo, but they have been signed by SRSG. And from 2008 until 2012, we did together with Mr. Fate. He was blaming us sometimes, he did some good remarks, but at the end we have succeeded. We put it together with Mr. Fate two main goals. I'm calling two balances: ethnic balance of the rights and geographical balance of the sovereignty. First one, we did good. And today in Kosovo, you can find the ethnic balance of the rights. New municipalities, representation of the Serbs or other communities of the central institutions, and other issues. Regarding to the geographical balance of the sovereignty, we have not been very successful. And because of that, maybe we have been forced to do the dialogue with Serbia, but also because of the peaceful cooperation. Regarding to the legislative reform, I'd like to show here and to present to you that we are having new modern criminal code, procedural code, and other. It was done 100% by international expertise. I signed it as a Minister of Justice. I sent it to the Parliament of Kosovo. I presented it, but I did together with international experts. The second one, we did very good structural reform. We are having very, very good structure in Kosovo. How they are functional, we are talking today. We are working today. But we are having the main institution for fighting. I am thinking that SPRK, Special Prosecutorial Office, is led by the International Prosecutor. It's one of the best, I'm thinking, not just from ULEX, but I think throughout the world. He did a good job in Bosnia, he's doing a very good job in Kosovo, and we are working very well together. They are having 5 main tasks. The first one is high profile of corruption, fighting. The second one, organized crime, terrorism, money laundering, and war crimes. And we did very big cases. During the time that Mr. Fade was in Kosovo, we did too many big cases. After that, we have continued. And today, Kosovo is a unique case, not just for the region. I don't like to present that we fight at everything and there is no corruption. But I like to present some of our successes. First, we did some investigation, indictments, even against the former ministers or ministers that have been in power. Governor of the bank, director of PTK, director of the customs service, director of different institutions, some mayors that Peter mentioned here. All of them, they've been arrested and they've been indicted during the time that we are in power, and they are belonging to our party. You cannot find another case, I may be cynical a little bit, but even in Sweden, that people from the ruling party, they are the most punished by the justice. And there are some evidences. We did this together with ULEX, but we created very good political environment. Even for war crimes, that they are very sensitive cases. We had very good, very close cooperation with ULEX, and we did without a big reaction. Today, you can find in Kosovo that the former commander of KLA, he is in prison. And different people, as Metsan mentioned here, they are heroes in our perception, but maybe they did some mistakes. Let's find proper way how to show that they did some mistakes or not. I'd like to show here that we are having very good institutions, Agency for Anti-Corruption, and different financial intelligence center and other. These institutions, they are new one. For sure, we need, and we are cooperating with ULEX regarding to these issues. I have 2 things in my mind when I'm cooperating with ULEX. The first one is how I can exercise my sovereignty 100%. The second one, how I can use their expertise 100%. We are not asking ULEX to kick out Kosovo until we are increasing our capacities. But in meantime, I'm asking my judges and prosecutors to wake up and to take some responsibilities to deal with the heavy cases. I think that we are in good way. We are working together. I hope from next year we will move from the position that ULEX is having today to the position that we will have ULEX or international judges in Kosovo and prosecutors and investigators too, but they will be embedded by our system. Because today we are having KGC, Judiciary Council, is independent from the government, is good. But we are having ULEX that is independent even from the KGC. We need to merge it because we are having the same priorities. Let me represent some activities that we need to deal with. Maybe we need to take care a little bit for the perceptions. I'm not saying that just for the perception inside of Kosovo, but for the perceptions outside of Kosovo. Sometimes we are sending different or mixed messages to Brussels. Why? Maybe we are not able to say our job how we need. Or the second one, maybe people that they are working in Brussels, they like to show that they are doing this job, not Kosovo judges and prosecutors, investigators. We need to share it. I like to see my prosecutors, that they are going together, like I'm doing with Mets, in front of the media, saying, yes, this is our job, because the success of ULEX is success for Kosovo, and failure of ULEX is not success for Kosovo, because we are failing the rule of law. The second one, we need to be careful, maybe, for the perception that we are having from the states that they are having dilemmas for the statehood of Kosovo. Sometimes they try to represent us as a failed state. It's not true. Not just because of us, but thanks to the support that we got and we are getting even today from the international community. We had UNMIC, we had ICO, we are having ULEX, everybody's active, and thanks to your taxpayers, we increased our capacities. I think that we need maybe to create kind of perspective, not just building the structure for the rule of law, but we need to deal maybe more regarding to the economy. Because through the rule of law, I fully agree with Peter and others that they said, okay, we need to do more for the economy, or maybe rule of law is the key. Yes, without rule of law, for investors, they will not come in Kosovo, or diaspora, they will not come, and different issues. But without economy is a problem to settle the rule of law, and maybe we need to work parallelly. There are 3 national resources. We are thinking national resources to use it properly and through the transparent way. The second one, maybe we need to do more for our diaspora to be attractive for them, and maybe the main one is how to be attractive for investors to come in Kosovo. The second issue is regarding to the EU integration. We are not creating illusions that we will get in within a day, but we are working for the process. If we are getting EU membership is the main success for us, but if we are fulfilling criteria during the process, it's a success too, because in meantime we are respecting rule of law, human rights, and different issues. It means that EU integration process is a tool. First, to make, I'm calling positive pressure on the government to do some reforms, but after that, government can do some painful reforms to the society. And what is EU integration for Balkans, for Western Balkans? It's not just related to the criteria that they are to justice or acquis communautaire, to the economy and to the political criteria. It is related to the extremism too. Through the EU integration, we are reducing extremisms, any kind of extremisms in Kosovo, Macedonia, Albania, and different states. The last one, we need to normalize relations with Serbia. We like, and I proposed some years ago, Treaty of Peace. I like to call Treaty of Peace, we can call different one, with Serbia. It was not very familiar proposing Treaty of Peace with Serbia that we did. We have exercised everything with Serbia except peace. Now we need to exercise peace. The last agreement, 19th of April this year, is having different perceptions. It's not just a political agreement. It's a historical one, because for the first time we are signing something, we are accepting something as a new reality. The second one, maybe the main one, is psychological aspect. We lived under the trauma, both sides. We created our myths, maybe from Serbian side, from Kosovo too. Now we got 2 more agreements. Nobody is not reacting. Everybody is accepting. They know that this is the new reality. It means that we need to work on that. And the main issue is that through the normalization of the processes, we are getting one part of our territory inside of Kosovo, northern part of Kosovo. It's not just related to the sovereignty of the state, but it's related to the rule of law too. Because in that part of Kosovo, they lived some people that they are less than 1%. They have captured that part on behalf of nationalism, on behalf of Serbia. But they are doing smuggling, they are doing organized crime, and they are cooperating, as Messan said, with our people too. There is excellent inter-ethnic cooperation. I invited people from Serbia, Minister of Justice, to cooperate with them. We are ready to cooperate, to stop criminals for so-called cross-border crimes. I think and I hope after the local elections, we will be more able to implement especially issues which are related to the rule of law or to the justice and to the police. But association too, we need to be careful. And I took notes from you, Peter, for the association. And for sure we'll take care that association will be limited inside of our constitution and the laws. In the end, I'd like to mention here that rule of law is the core stone for Kosovo, not just to present our image as a state in front of Brussels, Washington, and others, but it's a core stone to present ourselves in front of the people of Kosovo. Because if we are improving rule of law, there is the chance to present ourselves much better in Brussels, to get more recognitions, to get EU and maybe NATO or UN membership. Rule of law is a cornerstone, and we know that it's a priority of the priorities. But in meantime, we need to work parallelly with the different priorities: economy, EU integration, normalization with Serbia, and strengthening and cooperation with ULEX. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister Kuci. And I would now like to invite Inga-Britt Ahlenius and Mats Mattsson as well up here so we can open up for some questions. Inga-Britt Ahlenius, please, you're also welcome. If I may start just by asking, EULEX has been in Kosovo since 2009, fully operational, as I understand it, Mats Mattsson, and you are now working on your exit strategy and working very closely with Kosovo on these issues. How do you find the public support for your mission? And also if the Deputy Prime Minister would like to answer that question, but Mats Mattsson, if you could please start, because I understand it's not very an easy relationship.
The general public is a little bit changing views, and I would say that when we are doing some cases that is very public and noted by the general public, we get very good credit for it. But some cases we don't get very good credit for, rather the opposite. I can say, generally speaking, when it comes to war crime cases, we are in big trouble. We are not appreciated very much, but when we are doing crimes like rapes, like you have corruption against the states and so on, then they are, so to say, applauding us very much. That is generally speaking, and I think it is not very special. It is something about the same thing when you are working as a prosecutor in your own country. You have some crimes that are bad crimes and other crimes that are not so bad and that you are criticized for.
And what crimes in particular did you mention that are not so popular?
I would say generally the war crimes cases are quite unpopular in some parts of the population. And especially if you, of course, see that we are prosecuting Albanians, then the Serbians are applauding, and vice versa. But typically, it is not anything that we do gain too much credit for.
Mr. Kurci, do you have any reflections on this?
I fully agree with Mats what he said, because war crimes, they are sensitive one, but also we need to accept here that they started in some sensitive cases. Maybe they started much faster than we are able to do, but they have not finished very well because they have not cooperated very well with our institutions. They need two issues to take care. The first one, I am not talking for the balance on justice, because I know in justice there is no balance, but there is the problem to do the balance for the war crimes, because since ULEX is here, even the Serbian, even UNMIC time, we have the chance, according to our criminal code, to indict just Albanians. Serbs, they are not in Kosovo. We are not able to indict nobody who is not present. They are, all of them, they are in Serbia. And people feeling they are, okay, ULEX is doing something just against Albanians. They need to do that, but they need to maybe to have kind of public outreach why they are not doing against Albanians, because there are 15,000 people, they lose their family members. This is the issue. The second one, regarding to the corruption, organized crime, everybody saluting. They have been, even ULEX persecutors, they have been treated as the heroes. When they did, Peter was there too. If they are doing some cases like that, but they need to do successful cases. And I'm calling successful case, if they are having evidences, they are ending by the conviction. But if they are losing cases, they are losing credibility too. Our idea is that in politics, we are living with the perceptions, in justice with evidences. But at the end, ULEX is cooperating very well, and just they need to explain why we need ULEX, and we need to explain to them why we don't need them anymore. It is kind of negotiation, but it is partnership too.
Mm. Inga-Britt Ahlenius, do you have any comments on this, and also on the importance of having the support from the public?
Well, as I said, my experience from Kosovo days some years back, what I saw as the biggest problem at the time was the lack of accountability in the UNMIC mission, and also the fact that the focus on the quick fix really obscured the long-term commitment and the need for long-term perspective. And it was not just during my stay in Kosovo when I came to New York. OIOS, the oversight office which I was the head of, we had a small audit team in Pristina. And certainly after a risk assessment, I launched audits and investigations into the public enterprises. And the SRC at the time, he questioned my authority or the authority of the office to really do our work. So he asked for a legal opinion whether we had the right to carry out such audits, etc. So the big problem at the time, and I hope that has been dealt with, was the lack of authority, the impunity with which the leadership at the time left wrongdoings. In the reports that we finally carried through, in spite of his resistance, we frankly wrote that the UNMIC authority had put a blind eye to the existence of corruption in Kosovo. In this case, in the Pristina airport, for example, the KEK, the energy company.
Mats Mattsson first.
Please.
I think that the key to successful investigation is that you do cooperate, and I think that what has been the problem for UNMIC and with ULEX is that they have been working within the mission. They have not really been incorporated or have not incorporated the local to a team. I think we have, during the last year, been working extremely much with just trying to form teams that are working close together, mixed teams with locals and internationals. This, I think, is the only way of going forward, because I think that the problem is that if you're coming with a mission from outside, you have suddenly your own rules within that mission, and you have some own hierarchies, and those hierarchies are not really what the government of Kosovo likes to deal with. This is, I think, the big problem, and I think we are trying to solve that problem by our communication on these practical matters.
Mr. Kuchi?
Just for your explanation for people that they are not having it, during the UNMIC time, they did this not because of the Kosovo's authority, but because they've been the final authority to sign contracts and to sign the budget. They defended their people, not Kosovo's people. SRSG has signed the budget. For public companies, they were kind of manager from UNMIC and everywhere, even at the public university. I've been vice rector of the Pristina University during that time. We had the administrator for university, and he signed the contracts, not the rector. It means that they did something among themselves, not with our people. Even today, we are having general audit who is from Sweden.
Okay, I would like to open up for questions. We have one in the back and then there. Thank you. Please introduce yourself as well.
Roland Kostic again, Uppsala University. One question regarding dealing with the issues of legacies of clan structure in Kosovo. During socialist Yugoslavia, there were laws that actually dealt with the clan structure and actually forbid practices of kanuni, lekedu, kajini, and similar things. Are there any such effort in today's Kosovo to actually, through legal system, deal with the local practices of kanuni, lekedu, kajini, and similar structures? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kuchi?
Thank you. I find this question in some occasions, and really, I'm born in Kosovo, and I know that, and I propose to my students, kanuni, lekedu, kajini can be part of history. But we are having constitution, we are having laws, not today, 100 years ago. They were Yugoslav laws, Serbian laws, communist laws, but they were laws. Kanuni can be all kind of tradition among people, but it's not official, it's not nothing. And today we are having criminal code is the best one in the region. We are having constitution is the best one in the region too. Nobody is not living under the kanun. Some traditions, they are remaining, but for sure is not part of our society.
Okay, thank you. Then we have one question over there.
Ulf Svensson. I worked for 4 years as a Swedish diplomat in Yugoslavia and Albania. It was in the time of Tito and Hoxha. My question is to Mr. Kuchi. You just talked about the economic problems of Kosovo and something about the economic collaboration between Serbia and Kosovo. One question that have astonished me is, for Tito had the plans that Albania should be the seventh republic of Yugoslavia. And he had supporters among the communists in Albania, but Stalin didn't support him, and it didn't take place. We have two Albanian nations now in Europe. Why is that practically not mentioning anything about the cooperation, the economic potential? Is there any idea in any of the countries of a unification, having one Albanian state in Europe? We have two Koreas, but we have one Vietnam. Is there a possibility? Is there any such thinking in Kosovo or in Albania to merge? And what would be the economic consequences of such a merger?
Thank you, Mr. Kochi.
Okay, thank you. I'm too young for the communist time, and I read some books and I know the history. But you know, we were against Albanians in Kosovo. They were against communism and against occupation because we have had double pressure. Albanians in Albania just communism, and I think that they did good that they changed communism, and we did good that we changed communism and occupation too. Regarding to the regional cooperation, we are ready for economy, for competition, because we like to have free market economy. Even today, people from Serbia, they can come and compete in Kosovo, but also from Albania too. And we have defined it in our constitution, free market economy. Regarding to the unification with Albania, there are two dilemmas. The first one, sometimes people or states, they are using it against our statehood. Everybody, or especially people from Belgrade, they used it to oppose our statehood, saying yes, they like to unify it with Albania, because of that we need to oppose it. We like state of Kosovo. And the second one, EU integration is the best process for Albania, for Kosovo, Macedonia, Serbia, and everybody else. EU integration is the best solution for remaining parts of the ethnic compositions, for Albanians in Macedonia, for Serbs in Kosovo and other. This is our idea. We are supporting as a government EU integration. And after some years, we are becoming part of EU. Nobody knows exactly where is the border, but everybody knows that we need to be prepared to compete everybody's. Thank you.
Okay, then I would like to ask here, because you mentioned Mattsson about being a small country is many times difficult in terms of relations with other countries and dealing with organized crime. That sounds quite pessimistic now for the future then, or I would like to ask Mr. Kochi what your reflections on this. EU-Lex is of course a tool for dealing with these issues, but when they leave or exit in 2014, what will happen?
First, I think that we have encouraged regional cooperation, including Serbia, for fighting organized crime, cross-border crime, human trafficking, drug trafficking, and other. As the Minister of Justice, I signed an administrative instruction that I give full authority to EU-Lex to cooperate with non-recognizers. It means to cooperate with Serbia, with everybody else. And they did, and they are doing, and we are supporting that. The second one, we are working with Serbia, we are having a dialogue to have normalization for relations. It means at the end of the process, we need to have treaty of peace. We need to recognize each other, we need to respect each other, and we need to support each other in the international institutions. We'd like to be part of regional cooperation, EU integration, NATO, and everywhere. Today, we are getting obstacles from Serbia and their friends, but I hope in the near future they will be more flexible and they will show that they are supporting regional cooperation, international cooperation too. I hope that this is not a long process. It was long enough until today, but I hope we will get in. Through the dialogue, through the rule of law, through the building up our statehood state institutions, we will get in international institutions, but we will convince our friends from non-recognizers to recognize us. The small country is not a problem to the demographic or to number of people or to the territorial, but maybe because of our power. But if we are getting in, we are more powerful than Montenegro, for example. We are like Macedonia. It's not a big deal. The main problem is our statehood to be recognized by everybody, mainly by EU member states, and maybe after it with different states.
Mm. Inga-Britt Ahlenius, do you have any comments on this also on another level, how how to deal with these challenges with these problems that do not have any borders at all? You see that we can assist
I don't know really how to comment that. I just return to what I said earlier, that in order to solve a problem, you have to recognize it. And also in this case, to be aware of all these challenges that meet the Kosovo government and also the EULEX, and the long-term commitment to achieve something which is a success story. It's not a quick fix, it's not a project for 5 years.
What will happen with the EULEX after 2014 June? Mats Mattsson, will we see a continuation or?
I would say that the present plans are that the mission is going to end at the 14th of June 2014, and I think that that is not a realistic approach if you say that the matters we are dealing with is going to end. Maybe it's going to have another name, and maybe it's going to be branded a bit different, and maybe the dimensioning of the mission will be different. But I think that some of the elements that we have been focusing on are still needed. So I think that is going to be some continuation, and Hayreddin can talk about his point of view concerning the time of the mission and so on.
Please, Mr. Kucing.
Okay, thank you. First, I'd like to inform you and everybody else that we will not have unilateral decision. We will go in Brussels, we will convince them, we have presented our strategy, and we'll work together. The second one is not our intention to kick out EULEX and to have a gap on justice. It means that we need to increase our capacities and proportionally to decrease their capacities in Kosovo. The third one, the EULEX mission is not related to something that we like to be isolated, but we like to become closer to EU. It means through the structured dialogue for the rule of law, with SAA, visa liberalization process. But our idea is that, I'm repeating, we like to exercise our sovereignty 100%. We need their expertise for some period of time. We are negotiating with them. I'd like to increase the number of the judges, prosecutors, and investigators. That they are coming, they are with a high professionalism, they are working very well in Kosovo. We need them. But we need them that they are part of our system, not outside of our system.
Okay, now if I can have the microphone to the front row here, please. Mikael Salin and Mr. Fate, if you have short comments or questions.
I think great progress has been made in strengthening the rule of law in Kosovo, but my question is the following. There have been more investigations, there have been more indictments, but where are the examples of people being condemned to prison? Somewhere the judges seem unable to pass judgment. And this is important as a signal to society, and it is important as part of reconciliation. Talking about war crimes, I understand the sensitivity of war crimes, but war crimes are not only inter-ethnic crimes. There are crimes that have been committed during the war by Albanian commanders against Albanians. That's a third category, which we shouldn't forget. So my question really is, during the coming short or medium term, can we see people really end up being penalized or punished for what they have done?
Okay, and if we take Mikael Salin just before we go to the speakers.
Then mainly for Mr. Kucing, thank you so much for what you said. I was seeing that the Serbian Prime Minister was saying the other day that he wishes for the UNMIC and for KFOR and for EULEX to remain more or less as long as possible. So it is a sort of similar question whether you think from your government side that there is an end state, and or is it depending on what it means in terms of your accession, so that everything else is secondary. And for Mats, if I may, we talked in the first panel about the risks of extending for a long time, an executive presence. You have executive powers in your mission. Is there a downside to it, not only in terms of what it can achieve within reasonable time, but also its very presence? Can there be? Is there any risks of problems like prolonging or postponing necessary accountability? Is there a cost side to such a mission in today's world, or is it only a question of helping as much as asked for by the authorities? Thank you.
Okay, and now the final comments, if Mr.
Okay, I will try to be very brief. First, regarding to the question that Mr. Fate asked. You know, indictments, they've been prepared, they were issued by EULEX prosecutors, but also judgments from the EULEX prosecutors too. It means there is the same line. We have supported, as a Minister of Justice, I had press conference with previous Chief Marnak. Together with him, I said, yes, we are supporting rule of law, we are supporting EULEX prosecutors. After some years, they issued judgments that they are not guilty. I support it too. It means that I will support any kind of decision that is coming from prosecutors and is coming from the judges. I cannot exclude one of them, but both of them, they are EULEX judges and prosecutors. It means that we have not interfered. We had no chance saying, okay, if they were indictments from the EULEX prosecutors and they have been released by Kosovo judges, there is a dilemma. But they have been released from EULEX judges. The second question regarding to the end mandate of UNMIC, NATO, KFOR and EULEX. First, we are moving from one state to another one. We moved from UNMIC. We asked UNMIC to be out of Kosovo or to reduce their maybe as office. After some years, we asked Peter Fate, we cooperated with him to end his mission in Kosovo. Now we are asking EULEX, but we did through cooperation, not unilaterally. It's not our intention to have a unilateral decision, and we will kick out them. Regarding to the KFOR, we need to have KFOR here in Kosovo according to three main criteria. The first one, we need to increase our defense capacities. The second one, we need to include maybe or to integrate northern part of Kosovo. The third one, we need to improve to NATO membership. KFOR is not doing peace just for Kosovo, it's contributing for the peace of the region too. And I will end this regarding to the international missions with, I will quote Mr. Ahtisaari, President Ahtisaari. He said, I find it in his book, he said, international missions, they are like cigars. At the beginning, they are reduce your tensions, but in meantime, you will have some problems, and after some years, you will be dependent from the cigars. It's better to quit as soon as you can. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Mats Mattsson.
I can say concerning the problems of efficiency of this, I do agree with that is a problem. We have been working on it, and it's not so easy to solve. It is. It sounds easy just to put them in jail and lock the door and that's it. It is not, because it is more complicated. They are blaming, they are hospitalized, they are sick, they are problems, and they have those medical things. This makes it problematic. So we have to, so to say, find a solution to cope with those kinds of things that they are claiming they have, and we are trying to work out methods for that. I think we will be able to solve that, and I hope so. The other question concerning risks with EULEX executive powers, yes, I would say there is, of course. What is actually the fact is that the prosecutors and judges and the police officers are working with diplomatic immunity with these kinds of quite advanced operations, and sometimes they are not so careful what they are doing. So of course that is a problem. But I think the biggest problem is not those, so to say, accidents that is happening, because they do, of course, happen. But I think the biggest problem is that I was a little bit into that when I was talking, and that is the relation between the politics and the judiciary. Because if the politicians takes the power over the judiciary and will be able and can use their power to order the judges and the prosecutors to do the cases, then we are in trouble, and then we have gone too far, and then it would be very fast to kick out those guys, to put it that way, me and my guys, because that I think is a living problem. It is because it is a struggle. It is not a fiction. It is always a struggle between the politicians and the judiciary. I think we have it in our country as well, but it is more evident in that country where you have diplomatic immunity when you are doing the things. You don't have any responsibility. You are never responsible for your stupidity or your bad things when you're doing it. Sometimes everyone does anything bad, something bad. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Inga-Britt Ahlenius, you stressed the importance of a long-term commitment. Do you see any risks of prolonging missions?
Well, certainly there are risks in prolonging missions, but there are also risks in not prolonging missions. I think you should not leave Kosovo or any other state where you are engaged before you are really sure that you have established something that is viable in the long term, because Kosovo is dependent on the rule of law for attracting foreign investments, as an example, and the Kosovo can't survive in eternity on diaspora transfers and the transfers from the international community. Kosovo has to establish its own industry and to be self-supporting in the long run.
Thank you very much, Inga-Britt Ahlenius, Mats Mattsson, and Heidi Rinkucci. Thank you. Now it is time. Thank you. Now it is time for our next speaker, and we will focus on some historical lessons learned. We welcome now the retired Brigadier General Bo Pelnes. Bo Pelnes has extensive experience of the international peacebuilding mission, and he has spent a couple of years in the Balkans in the 1990s. He was, for example, the military advisor for David Owen and Thorvald Stoltenberg, and he set up an observation force in Serbia and Montenegro along the border with Bosnia in 1995. And the topic for Mr. Pelnes is Srebrenica, lessons yet to be learned. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Shall we try to get me on the stage? Yeah.
Go.
Yeah. Du som ser kan väl ta på bildspel där sen när det kommer upp. Där.
Ja, precis.
Okay, let's see what we can get. Yeah, there we are. I'll freshen you up with some pictures and images. Srebrenica is by far the worst atrocity committed in Europe after the Second World War. But to understand how we can stop those things from happening, we have to put it into an historic and political context. When I go on speaking now, it does not mean that I in any way diminish what you see on this picture. To describe where problems start on the Balkans, we are of course back in long historical terms, but let's start after the Great War, the First World War. where Croatia is pushed into the kingdom of Serbs and Croatians and Slovenes, which is an unhappy marriage. And when the Germans come into the Balkans, you have this strong nationalistic, fascistic government in Croatia under Pavelic, opening up a concentration camp at Jasenovac, where they killed many, many thousands of Serbs, Jews, and Roms. But also, when the war came to an end, Tito's partisans followed fleeing Croatians into Austria. And this is very little written about and known about, actually. But somewhere the Russians forced the other parties to push the Croatians back. And on a field near Bleiburg, there was atrocities during 3 or 4 days. Maybe 50,000 people were killed, which makes Srebrenica even look like a minor thing. When it starts in 91, you have all this ethnic cleansing starting. It starts with the Serbs in Erdut, in what was then called Krajina, in the south of Karlovac. Thousands of houses were eradicated. And in Jelgina and around the town of Zvornik, Vojislav Šešelj and all his hooligans and gangsters and the paramilitaries cleansed Zvornik, pushing out about 40,000 Bosniaks. Killing how many, we don't know. What is seldom told, however, is that during the same period, about, I would guess, 4,000 Serbs were evicted from Srebrenica. I saw the houses, the Bosniak army officer showed them to me, commenting, saying, we should have needed them now. How many were killed, I don't know. So there was a strong element of revenge among Serbs from Srebrenica. When things grow tense, Philippe Morion took some of my observers and went into Srebrenica, only to suddenly find himself being taken hostage. And making a virtue out of necessity, he came out on a balcony with an electronic loudspeaker declaring, "Je défends Srebrenica," I will defend Srebrenica, which was certainly way out of the mandate for the United Nations at the time. Whether he created the situation or if it had been in a French bag before it came into Morion's sack, I don't know. But immediately, about a month later, we had the resolution 819, establishing Srebrenica as a safe area. The idea about safe areas was eventually presented by the Italians at the London conference and later brought to the Security Council as a safe haven for Sarajevo. At the time they asked for 20,000 people to defend Sarajevo. Anyway, this resolution was immediately followed a month later by 824, which added as safe areas Bihać, Sepa, Gorazde, Tuzla. And for this rather big task, UNPROFOR was given 50 military observers. I don't hesitate to call this one of the most immoral resolutions taken by the United Nations. We were discussing in the UNPROFOR how many people were needed, and we thought there was something between 20,000, 30,000 men to really defend this. But the idea was, of course, not to defend. A month later, in June, the Security Council gave an acceptance to use NATO air power in the support of UNPROFOR. And the tasks were more precise. They did not order UNPROFOR to defend Srebrenica. The term was to deter from aggression. And any military man can tell you that it is a heck more difficult to deter from aggression than to defend a place. And we should not kick out the Serbs. We should promote withdrawal from others than the Bosniak and Herzegovina army, the Bosniak army. And that decision was followed by no reinforcement, but more of a demand for the nations to show up with more people. The first commander was the Swedish General Wahlgren. I think he more eventual by intuition saw what this meant. I'm not sure he fully understood that the 836 co-located one of the armies in Bosnia with the United Nations. And this means that you are partners, whether you like it or not. And he said that you can't make peace and war at the same time. This meant that he got probably rather a moment of irritation in Washington and New York. So he was taken away and replaced by the French General Kort. I know about, he really became a pain for them. But he was, of course, basically right. A year later, the commander in Bosnia, the Belgian General Brickman, wrote the following. And this is strange because just a few months ago, I had one of the leading editors of a big Swedish newspaper telling me that the United Nations had demilitarized Srebrenica and taken away the weapons. And that was definitely not the case. So Brickman says that they have been able to retrain, regroup, rearm, and were harassing the Serbs' villages around the city. And of course, and I should have done the same, the Bosniak government then called for air protection, which was actually mentioned in the 836. So it portrays also the difference between UNPROFOR and some of the nations not willing to go to war, and the NATO-American option to push the Serbs harder and knock them around a bit. In Srebrenica, I became very much involved when Morillon went in. I should perhaps comment on that. After he was taken hostage, more or less, we tried to get a Canadian unit into Srebrenica. And that was stopped, not in Bosnia, but on Serb territory, which was very strange. It was stopped on the Serb side of Drina, making no mistake that Milosevic was definitely involved in stopping this aid of coming into Srebrenica. And I was there trying to negotiate it. And we had a lovely first evening in Belgrade when everything was okay, and when we came down to the bridge, nothing worked. I came back and had a terrible night in Srebrenica, and I thought I lost the thing. And the next day, the unit moved on, so it was solved somewhere else, not by little me in Belgrade, probably New York. The situation in Srebrenica, they brought in the Canadian battalion. And after a while, the Canadians, someone's had enough of it, and Kort allowed one of the Canadian companies to move out, asking the Swedes to provide another company. I supported that at the UN headquarters, but the Swedish Prime Minister was, of course, much wiser than I was, and he refused to allow the Swedish contingent to go in. And the battalion commander sitting somewhere here, he was accused of not obeying orders from the French general. But Carl Bildt very wisely said, if the French are so eager to have a company into Srebrenica, they can do it themselves. However, the Dutch had for a long time been very vigilant and, I would say, almost aggressive in their languages, in their diplomatic activities, and I would say that more or less they talked themselves into Srebrenica. In the end, there was nobody else who wanted to go there. So the Dutch stood there, being very enthusiastic about the thing, and have to accept to send them in. And I will come back to that. Nasser Oric was a problematic man. It said that he had been the bodyguard of Milosevic. In Srebrenica, he not only ran the defense, he ran the prostitution, he ran the cigarette business, and his hooligans were out attacking Serb villages. And besides that, he also made business deals with the Serbs, probably with the goods coming in through the NATO and Red Cross. 10 days before the Serb attack on Srebrenica, our friend Oric left Srebrenica without any problems and walked away up to Tuzla, where we later saw him sitting on a cafe and probably running the more shady affairs in that village or town. I think a part of his army later left. Those who left 10 days before were his lieutenants and his staff. I think a part of the army left a little later on. But on the whole, the Serb Bosnian in Herzegovina army started on the long march up to Tuzla. And they were attacked a couple of times on the road. And it is during this period that the slaughtering starts in the killing fields around Potokari or west of Bratunac. The NATO Air Force was in the air the whole morning when the Serbs started. And finally, I think the Dutch agreed to have in some Air Force action. But then all the planes had gone home to Italy for lunch and Coca-Cola. So in the end, only 2 planes were put into action, attacking tanks without any result, actually. And 1 Dutch soldier was killed by not the Serbs, but the Bosniak army. And Ratko Mladic immediately promised the Dutch commander that if you continue bombing, that will be up to you, and threatened him dearly. And everybody realized that the game was over. The Serbs were inside Srebrenica, and there was no further air attacks. There's no reason at all to discuss Ratko Mladic's role in this. He appears on television on a number of occasions, telling the poor ladies and old men in buses that he is General Ratko Mladic. There has been a lot of business going on in Holland too. I think 3 different surveys about the Dutch battalion. And there's been a lot of noise about Lieutenant Colonel Karaman, who has a drink with Ratko Mladic. I have been on Serb television being kissed on my cheeks by Ratko Mladic and having bread and salt from him. It's not so easy to get out of these things as one might suspect. I would just point one thing. I would say that the Dutch contingent in Srebrenica was far too little to make a difference. And it was far too big to be a hostage. So the responsibility lies not with the Dutch soldiers inside Srebrenica. The Dutch government has definitely responsibilities to sending their soldiers in. UN has a responsibility. And most of all, of course, it's the Serbs who have a responsibility for this. There's no doubt about it. You tell me when we are running out. No. We'll come back to that one. No. Well, also when we discuss Srebrenica afterwards, we must realize all the propaganda that has gone into this. This is the American propaganda for the first Great War, 1917, I think. These are the children of Schiller and Goethe who are portrayed on this. So one is, of course, to make your enemy look evil and bad. And the other way is, of course, to make yourself look good. I think this is a fantastic propaganda photo for the Swedish army in Afghanistan. I will not comment upon it further. I'll leave it just there. But I will give a few seconds about Ratko Mladic. I met him about 10 times, I think, negotiated with him from around Christmas 92 up till actually 95. And he grew worse all the time. And that is what happened, I think, to most people who go to war for years. I'm also convinced that he was compensating the loss of his father for the rest of his life. He was 2 years old, I think, when his father died. So he had an enormous pressure to provide you with the image of a strong General Ratko Mladic. But we make it much too easy for us if we just see Ratko Mladic as the source of Srebrenica. He is a bad guy, but he is also a product of an environment, a political environment that never let the Second World War end, that kept the animosity, the hatred and everything going for all these years, which was more or less hidden under Tito's cloak. About the Serbs, I usually use the words of the diplomat Talleyrand, who said about the House of Bourbon, they have nothing learnt and nothing forgotten. And that is true about Ratko Mladic. He knew every bloody detail of Serb history and all the wrongdoings against Serbs, and he had absolutely learned nothing from it. He also had a very little knowledge about the world outside. And even if he had known, I don't think he would have paid any attention to it. He saw himself, I think, as a part of achieving long-term historic results for the Serbs. I also think, and may God forgive me now, I also think that Amprofor had a completely unsuited leader at the time, because he had no idea. He was a very nice man, a diplomat, and he had no idea how to handle people like Ratko Mladic. Because with these people, strength is almost the only thing they understand. And I saw him negotiating in Geneva in a very awkward way, where we should have just walked out and called in the United Nations Air Force at that moment. We had then long passed beyond the reach of diplomacy. A few things then, what can we do to stop it? We need effective war crime tribunals. And we must try to convince the United States to sign the treaty about war crime tribunals, to become part of it. Yeah, it's not a laughable thing. It is a disaster that the world's strongest nation is not signing the agreement of war crime tribunals. We need bigger standing EU response forces, which I think is perhaps a very rosy wish. I'm not sure we will get it. We need independent historic research. The biggest and best universities in the world should start doing this job. And there should be combined teams, so you can't say that they are not presenting the best of truth we can find. We must stop the Balkan historic writers and take them away from publishing. And I say again, which I said before, we need truly independent criminal courts in all the countries. EU has spent a lot of time of convincing them how to write the laws. I would say there's not much wrong with the Serb laws as they were. But as long as politicians can go in and push out the judge and put in another one, or to tell them how to put the verdict, then there will never be justice in this part of the world. This is the absolute must. A free press is important, but there will never be a free press unless there are courts who are independent. Number 5 is, I think, little overplayed, because most of the area is now ethnically cleansed. So the demand for integrated schools are not that big anymore. But where it exists, I think we should really demand it. For example, in Macedonia, I think there is only one school where Albanian and Slav children come together, but not at the same time, of course, not in the same class. And this is where we present the history to the next generation. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think we have time for one question. So if there is anyone that has a follow-up question here, and there is a microphone coming here.
Mitt namn är Erik Pierre. Jag var Sveriges ambassadör när det här hände i Bosnien.
Would you mind speaking English? Is that okay?
Oh, sorry. My name is Erik Pierre. I was the Swedish ambassador in Sarajevo when all this happened. And I have a slightly different picture of what was not done or what should have been done about Srebrenica than has been presented here. I would like to recall first that in the early June there was a meeting in Split with Akashi, General Janvier och den som var chef för and the general who was head of the UN forces in Bosnia. I've just forgotten his name now. Anyhow, yes, General Rupert Smith. At that meeting, there was, through intelligence, he had learned that Srebrenica was out to be the next victim from the Serb side. And he asked for permission to intervene with this potential risk for the safe area. And he was told by Janvier and Akashi that this was not going to happen. Janvier and Akashi were saying they were going to negotiate with the Serbs, so this will not happen. Rupert Smith had a totally different view. He didn't believe in any chance of discussion result between those two people. So when we came, and also I think Rupert Smith shared his experience from that meeting with the leaders in Sarajevo. And that is also, I think, one of the reasons why the Bosnian leader in Srebrenica didn't return. And also, when before the atrocities in Srebrenica on the 15th of July, Rupert Smith asked for leave during this time, because he didn't want to be responsible for UN forces and not being able to do anything what he wanted to do. I think that is an important picture of why this happened.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you like to comment anything on this, Bo Pennes?
I leave this for the historians. It is a very complicated thing. But I think anybody must ask himself, why does Nasser Oric leave Srebrenica about 10 days before the Serb attack? I'll leave that hanging in there. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now I would like to invite the final speaker of today, and we have the pleasure of having Ivo Viskovic with us. Ivo Viskovic is a Serbian diplomat and also university professor at the Faculty of Political Science, at the University of Belgrade.
Can you put it here? Sorry.
And Professor Viskovic will speak about Serbia as being the key player now when we have this final future-looking approach. Welcome, Professor Viskovic.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be invited and to be one of the speakers among these prominent persons who spoke before me. I hope to be what Americans call cherry on the cake, speaking the last, but after this statement it is very difficult to speak. I've been really very moved. Srebrenica is something terrible that happened, and I always feel ashamed, although I was engaged at that time against Milosevic, actively fighting him and his policy, but you know, seeing these pictures and knowing what happened, it's always extremely unpleasant. I agreed with organizers to be a short speaker, to give you a chance to have more questions or discussions, because I'm absolutely aware that being professor, if I take this cathedra for twice 45 minutes, you'll be dead, not born. And I'll speak very shortly and hope to have the opportunity to discuss to you. What's going with Serbia today? Serbia is extremely complex society, suffering a lot, suffering in many aspects, social, economic, moral. We have changed almost completely the society in very short time. Although some of my friends say that Europe is perhaps tired of enlargement, there is enlargement fatigue. In Serbia, they say it is a fatigue of transition, which lasts for 20 years. But what we have as a consequence is, in my opinion, very divided society. Society which can very difficultly find a unique policy and, of course, a unique direction of political action, including in foreign policy or international politics in general. We have two strong groups. One pro-European, in my opinion, still majority in Serbia. I say still because we had enormous majority, 72%, which is now under 50%, 48% by last poll. And we have strong group of those who are anti-European oriented, so-called patriots. I call them nationalists. Of course, it's not difficult, it's not easy to make a coherent policy in such a situation, especially because the results of our elections are always such that we have to have coalition government. And we make joke in Serbia, we say that comparison of the term enemy goes enemy, worse of that is arch enemy, and the worst is coalition partner. It is a joke, but to some extent it is also true. Small parties blackmail those who are majority in the government, and even if they try to make some coherent policy for a longer time, always there are some demands, some asks, or some, if I may call that, political jumps that make troubles to those who are in charge of politics and foreign policy in Serbia. In this moment, I'm sure you have also seen that from time to time we have statements or actions which contradict to those what is general line of foreign policy of the country. And general line is, and coalition partner agreed, European integration and reconciliation in the region. Two most important tasks. But from time to time you see very high officials saying something else, that we have friends on the other side, some very, very far away. I'm not now representative of the government. I'm professor. Again, I was not career diplomat. It was a short period of my life, nice, very nice one, but of course I feel as a free person and I speak on my behalf, not on behalf of the government. And I dare to say that those who try to find friends among others do that because they are desperate. Not because they really believe that, for example, Russia or China are really alternative for European Union, for our European perspective. They think that we have been for too long time under pressure, some even say under blackmail, and because of that we have to have some plan B, what is not typical for Serbs. I asked in one moment President Tadic, what is our plan B if we don't succeed with this, what we planned for Germany? And he said me, what a plan B? We don't need plan B. We are always sure that we'll succeed in what we have planned. And of course, if you don't succeed, if you fail, and it happens us very often, then you are in a trouble. And then you try to improvise. And because of that, you have a situation that from time to time people in Europe think that we play games with them, especially some countries, that we say one thing and that we intend to do other thing. I can assure you that it's in most cases absolutely not true. That is just an accident, because at the moment they have to do something, to deliver something to the people, and then they do what they can do, especially when it comes to investments. Investments are critical, in my opinion, for Serbia. Economic situation, especially unemployment, are dramatic. 24% in general, 40% among generation to 30 years. You know what are consequences of such a situation? Well, I'll say at this moment I'm Balkan optimist. Later on I'll explain what does it mean. In such a situation, when Russians or Chinese come and they offer you some investment, and there are no European investors ready to invest big money in your country, it is a very, very difficult situation, politicians to object and to say, no, thank you. When Chinese come and say, we would like to invest something big in Serbia, and you need to build a big bridge in Belgrade, and they say, okay, we'll invest 400 million euros, who will say no? When Russians come and say, we'll invest 1.5 billion euros in South Stream, who will say no? It is this situation that I think is critical for Serbia. We need more and more investment from the West, and it doesn't come. How to solve that? I have no recipe. And I can only judge that most of our politicians are in the same situation, that they have really no idea what is alternative, how to attract foreign investors, including by the rule of the law and similar measures to invest money in our country, which desperately needs that. But speaking politically, not only economically, I think that we have to solve, first of all, problems with the neighbors. And it was an idea by Boris Tadic, but in some way which is a little bit different than usually Europeans and other things. We have heard here a lot about Kosovo and problem between Serbia and Kosovo. But Tadic had another idea, that we do it oppositely, that we first of all reconcile with Croatia, with Bosnia, and then at the end with Kosovo, because it is extremely sensitive issue for Serbs, and in my opinion, I think, if I may say that, if it's not unpolite to say that, that Western countries made failures in that regard, that they pressed Serbia too much, and they demanded from Serbia something what was not realistic. I said to my German hosts when I was there that they needed 22 years to make first agreement with GDR. 22 years. And that they asked us to do that with Kosovo after 22 months. You know what was the answer? Okay, you can wait next 20 years. Sometimes it is extremely difficult in Serbia because I dare to say 90% or even more than 90% of population share emotions that it is something unjust towards Serbia. My German host told me that no one makes foreign policy on emotions. And I agreed, absolutely. But if you have emotions of 90% of the people, it is political fact. These are not emotions, you can neglect them. Or you have to do it very, very carefully. And that's the reason why I say that at the end of this process of reconciliation in the region, in the Balkans, we'll have to make some kind of historical agreement, how do you want to call it, treaty or other agreement, it's same to me, but something that will really solve the problem which lasts not for last 20 years, which lasts perhaps for last 100 or 150 years. What is also important for Serbia? A chance for people to be free to find a job abroad. I say that for Serbia, but I think that it's crucial for all Balkan countries. Because we have a situation which is ironical, that more than 50% of our youth is unemployed, and that 90% of them dream only to go abroad and to work abroad. They don't see chances for themselves home. And that is the reason why I said that I will try to explain my saying that I am optimist, Balkan optimist. Do you know the difference between optimist and pessimist in the Balkan? When they speak about situation home, pessimist says, situation is so bad that it cannot be worse. And optimist immediately replies, it can be, it can be. You laugh, but of course it's for us to cry, because perspective is not so nice. The other issue I will only mention now is our integration because of organizers here in NATO. It is completely unrealistic for next 10, 15 years. Only 27% of population support that idea. Of course, the reason is bombing in 1999. But what is peculiar and what is contradictory? When you ask people, are you for integration in NATO? Big majority will say no, for sure, 2/3. But then when you ask, are you for cooperation with Partnership for Peace? 62% exactly say yes. It's enough not to mention NATO. It doesn't mean that it's NATO program. Only don't mention NATO, everything is okay. I don't know whether you know, but Serbia is one of most active members of Partnership for Peace. Although we have strong political forces in Serbia, and even a document adopted in national parliament in one moment, which proclaims military neutrality for Serbia. And at the end, what are the chances for peace with Kosovo? Real peace. I think that on both sides we have to make some sacrifices. When I say that, I think that, for example, it has been on Kosovo side issue of property. No one in Europe thinks about that, and billions of euros of worth have been taken not only from Serbia as a state, from Serbian companies and Serbs as persons. My sister-in-law is from Kosovo. Her aunt went to there to see what's with house and with land. One Albanian said to her when she entered the house, "Go out and come never again. From now on, it's mine." The other was waiting here with a gun on the land, saying, "Don't come again, don't dare to come again. I'll shoot on you." It is something what is, in my opinion, shameful. If it is something that is sacrosanct in the West, it is property issue. And we have now a situation that property has been really taken from persons, concrete persons, from concrete firms, and of course, it is most difficult issue from the state. The other problem which I see is strong mistrust in the Balkans. I was also professor in Banja Luka and in Sarajevo. We were speaking about Bosnia and Herzegovina very little this evening. But I was shocked by mistrust of people living there who live alongside, who don't live together, who live one by other, but not one with other. Unfortunately, that is true also in some parts of Serbia, in the south, in Kosovo. You mentioned a few minutes ago that there are no common classes, that you have schools with one shift of Serb pupils, other shift of Albanians, or Muslims, and so on. This mistrust will last long, unfortunately. I was one of the last supporters of multi-ethnicity, but I have to admit that our idea failed in the Balkans. In the time of Tito, it was active. I raised in that way, I came from Croatia to Serbia to study, and when I say that I'm Croat and that I was twice Serbian ambassador, many people don't trust me. They say that's impossible, that a Croat is Serbian ambassador, and then I had to find some kind of explanation, and usually I say, well, nobody's perfect. Okay, I'll stop here. I see that you have interest by your eyes, and I hope that you can put me a question which I can answer, because usually it's much more difficult to find good answer than a good question.
Okay, thank you very much, and we will yes, and of course. Have questions immediately, and we jump right into there is a microphone coming here on the second row. Dario, yes.
My name is Anders Molander. I'm a retired diplomat. I was Swedish ambassador to Sarajevo between 2001 and 2005, so for 4 years. I don't know if we have time for another joke. I really appreciated the fact that you did tell some of the many political jokes that go around in the Balkans. One that I heard in Sarajevo was meant to explain to us foreigners the mentality of people in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it went like this. There was a farmer in Bosnia who was offered 3 wishes by a fairy. And so he says, I'd really like to have a cow. So, boom, there's the cow. And then he's reminded that he has 2 more wishes. So he says, I'd like the cow of my neighbor to die. So the cow dies. And then he's in a very difficult position to make the 3rd wish. And after some long thinking, he says, actually, I want my cow to die. And the fairy says, your wish? And then she says, before I leave, I'd really like to ask you, why did you want your own cow to die? And he says, otherwise my neighbor will come and ask me for milk all the time. It's an old story. Those who have been in the Balkans have heard it before. But on that note, and when I heard your reaction to Srebrenica and the pictures from Srebrenica, I wonder what the position of, or in Belgrade is on a reconciliatory process in the region. I know that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, because I worked for it for 4 years, without success. There is very little political interest in reconciliation, although some small steps have been taken mostly by NGOs. And also, what is the position in Belgrade on Republika Srpska? Because it seems to me that it's a big problem in Bosnia-Herzegovina that the leader of Republika Srpska in Bosnia-Herzegovina is talking about independence or going it alone or even going together with Belgrade and Serbia. And that is definitely not helpful, of course, for the solution of the problems of BiH. So what is the position in Belgrade on what Mr. Dodik is doing and saying? So it's two questions, reconciliation and Republika Srpska.
Regarding reconciliation, of course, I told you it is one of main goals. And especially Tadic was insisting on that. You know that he did several actions, traveling to Croatia and traveling to Bosnia, trying to solve that problem. We are aware that it is a very, very difficult problem and that it will last for some time to achieve this result. But regarding Republic of Srpska, we have officially recognized territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina in parliament document, which has the strength of the law. It means it's not only political declaration, it's law and political obligation for Serbian government to respect and protect territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Dodik has different relations with different politicians. He is, you know, a very foxy person, very intelligent, and what I say, ironically, one of American inventions. They invented him. They posted him practically when he had 4 MPs for prime minister at that time. And, well, it's not only one mistake that they made, but he is quite reasonable, and I had the opportunity to speak to him because he established Faculty of Political Sciences in Banja Luka, and we from Belgrade helped him to do that. And in these discussions, I found that he's realistic enough to understand where are the limits of his abilities. What can he say and what can he do? I'm absolutely sure that he will not try to destroy Bosnia-Herzegovina because he understands that it will not be allowed by the international community. But he'll threaten with that and he'll blackmail so much as possible because Dayton Agreement gives him and the Republic of Srpska certain authorities, and of course they try to defend them because they know that it defends their almost independent or semi-independent position. There are some people in Serbia who think that kind of compensation for Kosovo for Serbs could be Republic of Srpska. But there are many who oppose that. And if I say that very frankly, but I ask you kindly not to cite me, there is a mood among population against Serbs from Bosnia and Herzegovina and from Croatia. So-called Serbians, Serbs from Serbia, have now been very jealous. They think that those who came with a lot of money, that they bought property, that they took jobs for them, for their kids and so on. And sometimes you see even incidents when they, by dialect, understand that someone is from, let's say, Bosnia or Lika or Slavonia, doesn't matter where they came from. So it is not unique opinion, and I don't expect that anyone in Serbia, especially in today's government, will try anything like that to unite with the Republic of Srpska or to try to divide Bosnia to take Republic of Srpska.
Okay, finally, can you just mention briefly on how do you see the role of the EU in the region as a tool of assisting with the reconciliation, etc.?
12 years ago, I started writing a book, The Western Yugoslav Crisis. I have thousands of pages of documentation in my computer and in copies. I have 200-300 pages of my text, my own text. And I stopped and tried again for 3 or 4 times because I was not able to find the answers. The only thing I was sure was the title of the book. It would be The West and the Yugoslav Crisis with subtitle, Too Late, Too Little, Too Cheap. it was always too late, reaction, not prevention. It was always too little done, more could be done, and it was always with attempt not to cost very much. Does any one of you remember when Ante Markovic was Prime Minister of Yugoslavia in early 90s, before the split of the country? He asked West for the loan of $4 billion. And then they told him, do you know how much money is that? $4 billion. Americans spend more than 10 times more only in Bosnia. That's it. But of course, if I may add that, European integration is, in my opinion, the only way to solve the problem of the Balkans. Not only because we have to follow some rules, but because it is a good way for all our governments to impose some laws, some rules, and some values which are perhaps not popular among our population, but which they have as a kind of excuse. We have to do that. For each government, especially when they see that their success chances are 2, 3, 5% more than by their opponents, it is difficult to make unpopular political measures. And in this situation, they can do it with trying to justify it by demand of European Union. We cannot enter European Union not doing this or that. And that is one thing. And the other is European Union brings values that we need in the Balkans. Really, among others, tolerance first of all. Balkan societies in general are very, very intolerant. It is not in our traditions. We have, unfortunately, traditions of violent people. It was a proof of your masculinity that you are violent, that you are strong, and so on. I have problem when I teach my students to be tolerant, because among other jokes, when we speak about that, is a joke about chauvinists in the Balkans. Who are chauvinists among us? Those who hate the others, comma, more than needed. More than needed is, of course, point. It is all joke with anti-Semitism, but we use that in the Balkans. And at the end, I really made a joke when I said that I am Balkan optimist. I am optimist. I think that Balkan people have chance and they can succeed. We need good leadership. We need reasonable leaders. At this moment, I have to admit that I don't belong to those who are now in government in Serbia. I was on the opposite side, even criticizing them very, very much, not only during the 90s, also during the first decade of 2000. But I was pleasantly surprised by their ability to become realistic. Not all of them, but leading persons like Vučić, like Dačić, demonstrated a lot of reason. And I think that with such leaders, not only Serbia, also in other countries, we have a chance. People, unfortunately, in Balkans still today ask for leaders. We have no democratic tradition. People have not self-confidence in their own abilities. They always expect that someone will solve that problem for them, state, leader, and so on. And it is very, very important who is in charge, who are leaders in politics. And if we have reasonable persons, it is one situation. If we have, I dare to say, almost lunatics or political unrealistic persons, then we are in a trouble. I hope that some countries in Europe will show more understanding, more patience. I'm absolutely aware that there is no such thing as generosity in international politics, but from time to time, especially during my last mandate in the country we mentioned, I witnessed that there is a lot of impatience and a lot of readiness to press, to hardly press Serbia to do some things which are, in my opinion, not mature at this moment, which we can do in a year or 2 or 3, but not immediately as us to do it now.
Okay, I think this is very interesting, and I would love to continue this discussion. I know that there are more questions, but we need to round up. We are running out of time, and I will leave now the floor to Mikael Salin. But first of all, thank you so much, Ivo Viskovic, for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. On the note that you defined now, teaching us how to define optimists and pessimists. Can I be heard? Can I be heard? Thank you for helping us to define in Serbian terms the difference between optimists and pessimists, the way you did. I think it's a very important way to make use of that distinction. So that was interesting. Peter Fate and I started the discussion today asking, so who is more or less optimistic? And in view of that definition, that is an interesting line. Talleyrand, of course, saying that nothing learned and nothing forgotten would be the line of the pessimists in that sense, whereas we have heard so many signs, not least from the scene of Kosovo, that endurability and patience will finally pay. At least we have to believe so. So the obligation to be optimistic, if you're a crisis manager, as you said, Peter, would be one of the lines. I think it's somehow has transpired here that we cannot forget about the Western Balkans for all the concerns that we have in other crisis areas of the world. Because after all, the Western Balkans is part of Europe, needs to be there, needs our assistance to become full-fledged members, and cannot forever be recipients of crisis management. A tone of a cautious mixture of optimism in that sense and pessimism, and the sober voice of zweck-optimistisch gloom from Professor Viskovic right now would seem to send an end to the conference. We will not finish this subject, obviously. We will not repeat a new conference in a few weeks' time, but we will be reminded that we need to constantly keep in mind what is the special qualities of the Western Balkans. It will not go away, nor will its problems, but it will be extremely helpful for all of us to be engaged. So on this note, realizing that the next year might, although we keep saying next year or the year after will be crucial, that's another joke. But there are events upcoming that I think will show. And then, of course, the EU will enter into new election rounds and have a new commission, etc., new enlargement commissioner. Unless Füle will be able to continue, I don't know about that, if he can constitutionally. So, I mean, there are things that would need to be put in place, and I congratulate you, Minister, of giving us such a competent picture of a very ambitious government of Kosovo. I wish there was someone here from Bosnia as well. I don't know if you, Nils Eliasson, would have any comments on the situation there. If not, then I can add nothing to what I said. There are concerns, but there are possibilities. So thank you all for coming. Thank you.